Chapter 12, Robinson Crusoe. This is quite a short chapter, and after this we have chapter 13, chapter 14, and then a brief epilogue, and we are done reading Robinson Crusoe. And yes, we can celebrate, or at least my voice can celebrate, because I do get a little throaty doing all this loud reading into a microphone. Maybe I should actually show you my microphone so you can see what it is. It's quite a beast of a microphone, but it helps to pick up my voice and hopefully make it so that I don't have to be quite as loud as I would be otherwise. Chapter 12. My island was now peopled. It was populated. Hooray! He's got people on the island with him. He spent the last 3 years with Friday, and now they have this Spanish sailor and also Friday's father. So, yay. My island was now peopled, and I thought myself very rich in subjects. Ooh. So now we see that Robinson really does see himself as the ruler of the island. He has already been calling his settlement his castle, and now he has a kingdom. He has subjects. Tonight it is tea in this Canadian mug. Victoria, Canada. Oop. My island was now peopled, and I thought myself very rich in subjects, and it was a merry reflection which I frequently made, how like a king I looked. First of all, the whole country was my own property, so that I had an undoubted right of dominion. Secondly, my people were perfectly subjected. I was absolute lord and lawgiver. They all owed their lives to me and were ready to lay down their lives if there had been occasion of it for me. As soon as I had secured my 2 weak rescued prisoners and given them shelter and a place to rest them upon, I began to think of making some provision for them. And the first thing I did, I ordered Friday to take a yearling goat betwixt a kid and a goat out of my particular flock to be killed. When I cut off the hinder quarter and chopped it into small pieces, I set Friday to work to boiling and stewing, and made them a very good dish, I assure you, of flesh and broth, having put some barley and rice also into the broth. And as I cooked it without doors, for I made no fire within my inner wall, so I carried it all into the new tent. And having set a table there for them, I sat down and ate my own dinner also with them, and as well as I could cheered them and encouraged them, Friday being my interpreter, especially to his father, and indeed to the Spaniard too, for the Spaniard spoke the language of the savages pretty well. After we had dined, or rather supped, I ordered Friday to take one of the canoes and go and fetch our muskets and other firearms, which for want of time we had left upon the place of battle, and the next day I ordered him to go and bury the dead bodies of the savages, which lay open to the sun, and which would presently be offensive. And I also ordered him to bury the horrid remains of their barbarous feast, which I knew were pretty much, and which I could not think of doing myself. Nay, I could not bear to see them, if I went that way, all which he punctually performed, and defaced the very appearance of the savages being there, so that when I went again I could scarce know where it was, otherwise than by the corner of the wood pointed to the place. I then began to enter into a little conversation with my 2 new subjects, and first I set Friday to inquire of his father what he thought of the escape of the savages in that canoe, and whether we might expect to return of them with a power too great for us to resist. His first opinion was that the savages in the boat never could live out the storm, which blew that night they went up. His first opinion was that the savages in the boat never could live out the storm, which blew that night they went off, but must of necessity be drowned or driven south to those other shores, where they were as sure to be devoured as they were to be drowned if they were cast away. But as to what they would do if they came safe on shore, he said he knew not. But it was his opinion that they were so dreadfully frightened with the manner of their being attacked, the noise and the fire, that he believed they would tell their people they were all killed by thunder and lightning, not by the hand of man, and that the two which appeared, Friday and me, were two heavenly spirits or furies, come down to destroy them, and not men with weapons. This he said he knew, because he heard them all cry out so in their language to one another, for it was impossible to them to conceive that a man could dart fire and speak thunder, and kill at a distance without lifting up the hand, as he was done now. And this old savage was in the right, for, as I understood since by other hands, the savages never attempted to go over to the island afterwards. They were so terrified with the accounts given by those 4 men, for it seems they did escape the sea, that they believed whoever went to that enchanted island would be destroyed with the fire from the gods. This, however, I knew not, and therefore was under continual apprehensions for a good while, and kept always upon my guard, me and all my army, for as we were now 4 of us, I would have ventured upon 100 of them fairly in the open field at any time. In a little time, however, no more canoes appeared, and the fear of their coming wore off, and I began to take my former thoughts of a voyage to the main into consideration, being likewise assured by Friday's father that I might depend upon good usage from their nation on his account if I would go. But my thoughts were a little suspended when I had a serious discourse with a Spaniard, and when I understood that there were 16 more of his countrymen and Portuguese, who, having been cast away and made their escape to that side, lived there at peace with the savages, but were very sore put to it for necessaries, and indeed for life. I asked him all the particulars of their voyage, and found they were a Spanish ship bound from the Rio de la Plata to the Havana, being directed to leave their loading there, which was chiefly hides and silver, and to bring back what European goods they could meet with there. That they had 5 Portuguese seamen on board, who they took out of another wreck. That 5 of their own men were drowned when the first ship was lost, and that these escaped through infinite dangers and hazards, and arrived almost starved on the cannibal coast, where they expected to have been devoured every moment. He told me they had some arms with them, but they were perfectly useless, for that they had neither powder or ball, the washing of the sea having spoiled all their powder but a little, which they used at their very first landing to provide themselves some food. I asked him what he thought would become of them there, and if they had formed no design of making any escape. He said they had many consultations about it, but that having neither vessel or tools to build one, or provisions of any kind, their counsels always ended in tears and despair. I asked him how he thought they would receive a proposal from me, which might tend towards an escape, and whether, if they were all here, it might not be done. I told him with freedom I feared mostly their treachery and ill usage of me, if I put my life in their hands. I told him it would be very hard that I should be the instrument of their deliverance, and that they should afterwards make me their prisoner in New Spain. I added that otherwise I was persuaded, if they were all here, we might, with so many hands, build a bark large enough to carry us all away, either to the Brazil southward, or to the islands or Spanish coast northward. But that if in requital they should, when I put weapons in their hands, carry me by force among their own people, might be ill used for my kindness to them, and make my case worse than it was before. He answered with a great deal of candor and ingenuity that their condition was so miserable, and they were so sensible of it, that he believed they would abhor the thought of using any man unkindly that should contribute to their deliverance, and that, if I pleased, he would go to them with the old man and discourse with them about it, and return again and bring me their answer, that he would make conditions with them upon their solemn oath that they should be absolutely under my leading as their commander and captain, and that they should swear upon the holy sacraments and the gospel to be true to me, and to go to such Christian country as that I should agree to, and no other, and to be directed wholly and absolutely by my orders till they were landed safely in such country as I intended, and that he would bring a contract from under their hands for that purpose. Contract. Very official. Then he told me he would first swear to me himself that he would never stir from me as long as he lived till I gave him orders, and that he would take my side to the last drop of his blood if there should happen the least breach of faith among his countrymen. He told me they were all of them very civil, honest men, and they were under the greatest distress imaginable, having neither weapons or clothes, nor any food, but at the mercy and discretion of the savages, out of all hopes of ever returning to their own country, and that he was sure if I would undertake their relief, they would live and die by me. Upon these assurances, I resolved to venture to relieve them, if possible, and to send the old savage and this Spaniard over to them to negotiate. But when we had all things in a readiness to go, the Spaniard himself started an objection, which had so much prudence in it on the one hand, and so much sincerity on the other hand, that I could not but be very well satisfied in it, and by his advice put off the deliverance of his comrades for at least half a year. The case was thus. He had been with us now about a month, during which time I had let him see in what manner I had provided, with the assistance of Providence, for my support, and he saw evidently what stock of corn and rice I had laid up, which as it was more than sufficient for myself, so it was not sufficient, at least without good husbandry, for my family. Now it was increased to number 4. But much less would it be sufficient if his countrymen, who were, as he said, 14 still alive, should come over. And least of all should it be sufficient to victual our vessel, if we should build one, for a voyage to any of the Christian colonies of America. So he told me he thought it would be more advisable to let him and the 2 others dig and cultivate some more land, as much as I could spare seed to sow, and that we should wait another harvest, that we might have supply of corn for his countrymen when they should come. For want might be a temptation to them to disagree, or not to think themselves delivered, otherwise than out of one difficulty into another. So basically the Spaniard has pointed out that if Robinson is really going to help the other Spanish and Portuguese people that were stranded with this Spaniard and get them onto his side, then they need to grow more food to be able to support everyone, especially if they plan on going on a long sea voyage together. His caution was so seasonable and his advice so good that I could not but be very well pleased with his caution was so seasonable and his advice so good that I could not but be very well pleased with his proposal, as well as I was satisfied with his fidelity. So we fell to digging, all 4 of us, as well as the wooden tools we were furnished with permitted, and in about a month's time, by the end of which it was seed time, we had gotten as much land cured and trimmed up as we sowed 22 bushels of barley on, and 16 jars of rice, which was in short all the seed we had to spare. Nor in fact did we leave ourselves barley sufficient for our own food, for the 6 months that we had to expect our crop, that is to say, reckoning from the time we set our seed aside for sowing, for it is not to be supposed it is 6 months in the ground in that country. Having now society enough, and our number being sufficient to put us out of fear of the savages if they had come, unless their number had been very great, we went freely all over the island, wherever we found occasion. And as here we had our escape or a deliverance upon our thoughts, it was impossible, at least for me, to have the means of it out of mine. To this purpose I marked out several trees which I thought fit for our work, and I set Friday and his father to cutting them down. And then I caused the Spaniard, to whom I imparted my thought on that affair, to oversee and direct their work. I showed them with what indefatigable pains I had hewed a large tree into single planks, and I caused them to do the like, till they had made about 12 large planks of good oak. What prodigious labor it took up, anyone may imagine. At the same time, I contrived to increase my little flock of tame goats as much as I could, and to this purpose I made Friday and the Spaniard go out one day, and myself with Friday the next day, for we took our turns, and by this means we got about 20 young kids to breed up with the rest, for whenever we shot the mother, we saved the kids, and added them to our flock. But above all, the season for curing the grapes coming on, I caused a prodigious quantity to be hung up in the sun, and these with our bread was a great part of our food, and very good living too, I assure you, for it is an exceeding nourishing food. It was now harvest, and our crop in good order. It was not the most plentiful increase I had seen in the island, but, however, it was enough to answer our end, for from our 22 bushels of barley we brought in and thrashed out 220 bushels, and the like in proportion of the rice, which was store enough for our food to the next harvest, though all the 16 Spaniards had been on shore with me, or if we had been ready for a voyage, it would very plentifully have victualled our ship, to have carried us to any part of the world, that is to say, of America. So, any part of the world, well, the Americas. But yes, they managed to grow enough food, harvest enough food, in order to serve them, quite a large group of them, for quite some time. When we had thus housed and secured our store of grain, we fell to work to make more baskets in which we kept it, and the Spaniard was very handy and dexterous at this part, and often blamed me that I did not make some things for defense of this kind of work, but I saw no need of it. And now, having a full supply of food for all the guests I expected, I gave the Spaniard leave to go over to the main to see what he could do with those he had left behind him there. I gave him a strict charge in writing not to bring any man with him who would not first swear in the presence of himself and of the old savage that he would do no way injure, fight with, or attack the person he should find in the island, who was so kind to send for them in order to their deliverance, but that they would stand by and defend him against all such attempts, and wherever they went would be entirely under and subjected to his commands, and that this should be put in writing and signed with their hands. How we were to have this done, and when I knew they had neither pen or ink, that indeed was a question which we never asked. That's funny. Under these instructions, the Spaniard and the old savage, the father of Friday, went away in one of the canoes, which they might be said to come in, or rather were brought in, when they came as prisoners to be devoured by the savages. I gave each of them a musket and about 8 charges of powder and ball, charging them to be very good husbands of both, and not to use either of them but upon urgent occasion. This was a cheerful work, being the first measures used by me in view of my deliverance for now 27 years and some days. I gave them provisions of bread and of dried grapes, sufficient for themselves for many days, and sufficient for all their countrymen for about 8 days, and wishing them a good voyage, I saw them off, agreeing with them about a signal they should hang out at their return, by which I should know them again when they came back. At a distance before they came on shore. They went away with a fair wind on the day that the moon was at full. They went away with a fair wind on the day that the moon was at full by my account in the month of October. But as for an exact reckoning of days, after I had once lost it, I could never recover it again, nor had I kept even the number of years so punctually as to be sure that I was right, though as it proved when I afterwards examined my account, I found I had kept a true reckoning of years. So he has sent them off. What is going to happen next? Chapter 13. How about a little bit of a hint here? Because that was kind of a cliffhanger. It's on some ways one of the first sort of cliffhanger conclusions to a paragraph, to a chapter that we have really seen. It was no less than 8 days I had waited for them when a strange and unforeseen accident intervened, is how the next sentence in chapter 13 begins. So we will find out next what that strange and unforeseen circumstance is.